Hey, so your goal is to speak English fluently, like a native English speaker. Well, in order for you to sound like a native English speaker, there are certain English words that you must know. So in today's lesson, I'm going to give you the word you need to study in order to sound like a native English speaker. Word you must know. Are you ready? Let's jump right in.
Miserable.
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 Miserable. Miserable.
Miserable means extremely unhappy, for example, because you feel lonely, cold, or badly treated.
Miserable means very unhappy, or causing much unhappiness.
Miserable means being in a pitiable state of distress or unhappiness, as from want or shame.
Miserable means very unhappy or uncomfortable.
Miserable means wretchedly unhappy or uncomfortable.
Synonyms for miserable: unhappy, wretched, sorrowful, depressed, sad.
Antonyms for miserable: happy, joyful, cheerful, jolly, good.
Miserable. Miserable.
Miserable. Miserable.
Miserable. Miserable.
Miserable. Miserable. Miserable. Miserable.
Miserable. Miserable.
Miserable. Miserable.
Miserable. Miserable.
Miserable. Miserable.
I feel miserable. I feel miserable.
I feel miserable. I feel miserable.
So that day I was feeling miserable. Oh
God, why do I feel so miserable? Oh God, why do I feel so miserable?
We feel miserable. We feel miserable.
And you feel miserable all the time. And you feel miserable all the time.
Because some part of me wanted to feel miserable in love. Because some part of me wanted to feel miserable in love.
And I only feel unhappy and I feel miserable. And I only feel unhappy and I feel miserable.
You just feel miserable. You just feel miserable.
So the patient looks okay, they look healthy, but they feel miserable. So the patient looks okay, they look healthy, but they feel miserable.
He looks miserable. He looks miserable.
Yeah, he looks pretty miserable. Yeah, he looks pretty miserable.
Poor George, you look miserable. Poor George, you look miserable.
God, you look miserable right now. God, you look miserable right now.
And you look miserable. And you look miserable.
Why do you look so miserable, Harry? Why do you look so miserable, Harry?
What's wrong with you? You look miserable. What's wrong with you? You look miserable.
Makes me miserable. Makes me miserable.
Making people miserable. Making people miserable.
Whatever makes her miserable. Whatever makes her miserable.
It's making me miserable. It's making me miserable.
I make myself miserable. I make myself miserable.
We make each other miserable. We make each other miserable.
I make you miserable. I make you miserable.
And that makes me miserable. And that makes me miserable.
I'm miserable. I'm miserable.
I'm miserable. I'm miserable.
I'm miserable. I'm miserable.
Work, I'm miserable. Work, I'm miserable.
And I'm miserable. And I'm miserable.
I'm miserable. I'm miserable.
So I want to say thank you to watch this video. I love teaching English. I love helping you achieve your goals, and when I hear your stories, man, they just make me so happy and make me want to work harder to help you achieve your goals. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson. I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.